Unscripted.
So what happened, was something quite traumatic happened to me recently. A young person referred to me as uncle. And although I'm like a father of three, alhamdulillah,
Allah,
just being called uncle by a young person really hit me. So I wanted to invite some brothers on to help increase my street cred and my connection and understanding with the youth dems. So I'm glad to be joined, alhamdulillah, by Abdul Jaleel and AbdulKarim, who are both, I think it's safe to say, veterans, dons in the youth work game.
Not at all, man. Not at all.
And humble as well, apparently. Inshallah. So, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Starting from the right. Not that he's better than you or anything. I'm sure you're better than him.
Abdul Karim, he's talking about street cred, yeah. So I think we need to take him shopping. Can you imagine? Like, you trying to approach some young people, like, they're gonna think. They're gonna see us and run.
No, they're really gonna call him uncle.
Uncle.
I'll have you know. I'll have you know that this garb is all the rage in Faisalabad.
Okay.
Yeah, in Lahore, Faisalabad, all these places full bustling with youth.
Yeah. So he works over there. I'm not sure if he works here.
Bringing out South London, mate. We gotta go take you to the wardrobe, mate.
So yeah, you guys are, mashallah, youth workers. Let's hear a bit about yourselves. I couldn't do you justice. I mean, you were saying you've been working with youth for 18 years. You've been
13, 14 years, 13, I think.
14 years, mashallah. So how can I increase my street cred? AbdulKarim.
How can you increase your street cred?
Yeah.
Be you, man. You don't have to increase your street cred. Increase your cred.
I like the answer. I'm not even going to ask you. That's enough of an answer. So, what do you do for a living? Can you explain? Introduce yourself to the listeners.
What do I do for a living? I help people, primarily young people. I've been doing that as my main source of work for the last, say, 8-9 years in terms of being paid and stuff of that nature. And volunteering before that quite a lot. But yeah, I just help young people in any way I can. I think I've gravitated towards more supporting young people at risk in different tiers. So tier 4, which is very serious safeguarding issues, right the way down to like the tier 2 where they don't need that much intervention, just some support. But yeah, just help young people, support young people, and that's my passion.
And you're based in South London?
Mm-hmm.
South of the river, okay.
Southside stand up.
Abdul Jaleel.
We don't want any beef. South London stand up, man. I was like, it's become territory.
Everyone's firmly sitting down.
East London's like gets a lot of slack in it, so it's just So yeah, I guess my story is, so I grew up in, I'll just kind of give you a story, I guess, because I think everyone has a story and how they kind of got into working with young people. Most of the time it's kind of lived experience and just being in that environment. So I grew up in Tower Hamlets. I grew up in East London Tower Hamlets. At the time it was one of the worst boroughs. Very high drug abuse, I guess. Definitely around heroin and crack at the time. Went to a school there, one of the worst schools in the borough. And then just being in the environment, just seeing everyone, you know, living the same lifestyle, ended up in the same outcome, I guess. And then, so me being a young person witnessing that, I guess organisation wanted to kind of tap into my insight and why were people going leading a certain path. So I became a young person and I guess advocating for other young people who are involved in crime, serious youth violence and so forth. And this was like in 90, 2000 actually. 2000, I started kind of doing a lot of advocacy, volunteering, and eventually I kind of decided, like, you know what, let me try and make I didn't know what else to do at the time, but it was kind of like, let me just make a career, like, let take this seriously. So I just kind of did loads of different projects, worked for different organisations. Obviously, I started off in East London, and eventually I wanted to kind of broaden out to like North London. Worked in West London, so my kind of career started from there. So at the moment, I wouldn't say like I'm a specialist in a particular field. I think I've just got a lot of experience working with disadvantaged young people over the period. And
do they tend to be mostly ethnic minority backgrounds?
Yeah, they're mostly. So I worked in. So Tower Hamlets was a lot of our clientele. Tower Hamlets were either Afro-Caribbean or Bangladeshi background. That was a kind of large. When I went to North London, it was dominantly white, and I was working in a very dominantly white community, which was interesting because I got to have a deep insight, especially that area.
What kind of white? Working class white?
Yeah, working class white, and that particular area had a history around organised crime.
Yeah.
So without dropping names, certain families were running the show. So me as a worker that was going in there, I felt that they were running the show. You felt that there's things going on behind the scene.
So the white people were more organised.
You know, yeah. So that was the kind of and then I ended up working in Ladbroke Grove for a few years, and that was an amazing experience. I worked with a large Somalian, Moroccan, Caribbean community over there. That was an amazing experience. And then so that's kind of like, I guess, my kind of story and my kind of background, how I got into working with young people.
So I mean, youth issues, specifically violence and knife crime and stuff, has been kind of trending in the news recently, but it's not really a new thing, is it? I mean, from your experience, is it something that's been increasing, or is it something that was always there but just now it happens to be on the mainstream media?
I was having this conversation today with one of my colleagues. Violence, especially in like working class communities, has always been prevalent, unfortunately. What we're seeing now is the rise in young people involved in more serious violence. So, for example, recently there was a headline of a 14-year-old who was arrested for murder of an 18-year-old. My anecdotal experience, when I worked in the A&E institution, I got to see how young victims and perpetrators are or were at the time, but are, because it's still continuing. And for me, it's quite alarming. I'm going to be brutally honest. And I tried to raise the alarm bells a couple of years ago, like, right, this is actually kind of serious. And I think people caught on after. So between like 2017, 2018, I think that's when the media and the public, and there was more outcry because there was a lot of high profile murders and people, to pay notice. But it's been going on for the last, let's say, I think from my experience and from what I see on the ground, it's been a pandemic for the last, from about 2015, it's been a pandemic. I think with this, social media has amplified it significantly.
Okay.
And that's enabled the community and the public to be like, oh, this is quite a problem.
Do you mean it's amplified the actual problem, or it's made awareness of it more widespread?
Social media is amplified anyway. So anything that takes place, if it goes on social media, it spreads like wildfire. So
more and more people start doing the crime, or just more people know about it?
So unfortunately, there was a high profile passing of a young person not too long ago, and the story is that he was what's the word I'm looking for? He was taunting other young people, which resulted in the swift retaliation where he was a victim and didn't survive. And this is becoming quite prevalent. We're seeing a lot of young people taunting other young people on social media with firearms, with knives, verbally. And you have to understand, social media is a public platform. We're on social media right now. It's a public platform. And, if you want to look after your street cred, then don't let anybody diss you on social media. But that's the reality. A lot of young people have their quote unquote their honor to protect. on social media. You've got a platform of X amount of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people watching this public display.
What was before in the maybe limited to the schoolyard, now
or
it's
in the
kind of
estate or in the street. Now it's a show. The streets are a public show, and that is going to result in a lot of issues. So that's why it's a lot more of a pandemic, and it's going to get into a state of an emergency because it's not slowing down. There's a murder that happened in my community today. No, stabbing, sorry, that happened in my community today, so not a murder.
I guess adding to what AbdulKarim was interesting, and I think we should come back to social media, but I think that may be some later point. But yeah, I think that's an interesting thing because I think that's one of the major issues. But yeah, I think we should come back.
So in your opinion, is it getting worse? Is the problem getting bigger? So AbdulKarim saying people are getting younger and the crimes are getting more serious. Yeah. In his experience, anecdotally, is there stats on this? What about in your experience?
I guess from my experience, I had this discussion as well today, and I said the same thing. Like, to be honest, people carrying knives was always a thing. Like from when I was young, like I was mentioning today, that people carry knives to school because they had
scouts.
You are so hilarious. I can't do it.
See why you don't have street kids, yeah?
Man said scouts,
Once we had a talk in our school, a policeman gave an assembly when I was in high school, Drayton Manor High School, and
in Birmingham?
No, it's in West London.
Oh, sorry, that shows how much I know.
And he goes, if you get caught with any blade without a proper reason to have it, then you'll get in XYZ trouble. And then like 20 people put their hand up asking the same question. So just theoretically, what would be a proper reason to hold and not get in trouble?
What's the exemption?
So he mentioned if you're going scouts, you need whatever, Swiss Army knife and that kind of stuff.
I remember people were measuring it. Like, is it longer than a little finger? If it is, it's a criminal offence or so forth.
Scouts.
Anyway, is it getting worse?
Yeah.
You're saying people used to carry knives. To be honest,
carrying knives. And AbdulKarim, please, good to get your thoughts on this. But for me, carrying knives was always an issue. Like people were carrying knives at the time. Yeah.
But were they carrying samurai, like the Rambos? You see the knives that I remember back in the day were like flick knives and then wet you in the face.
Yeah.
As a marking. Very rarely, and maybe the dynamics between south and east might be. So you get a wet. Yeah. Cut across the face or a little poke. They might be like knives like this big, which in my area, not everybody carried a knife. You'd more get rushed in the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah. Now it's uniform, and they got Rambos. They order them off Wish. These big, like 19-inch, 17-inch, 20-inch. Yeah, not machetes. These are like proper Rambo. Remember the Rambo First Blood?
Like Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
I remember, so for example, in Tower Hamlets, and I think I could only talk from,
I say Crocodile Dundee. That is mad.
So I guess, in Tower Hamlets, in talking from, the Asian community, they were carrying that kind of heavy Rambo. Yeah, and all that. And because that was, but that time, they didn't call it knife crime. They were calling it serious youth violence. That was a term that was coined at the time, was that there's a serious youth violence issue because they may not necessarily use a knife. They might just come with a hammer and they might come with a baseball bat. Just they'll use some sort of tool.
Wrapped in cellophane.
Whatever the case, it was a big issue, and that's why they set up. I remember there was an organisation where it was a dedicated team that was responding to any gang activity into Hamlets, and that was a big thing at the time. So, in terms of, for me, serious youth violence has always been there. I think there is definitely a spike currently at the moment, I think statistically as well. And it is a concern, working for a youth organisation and sitting in meetings, there is a massive discussion at the moment around, how do we tackle this? And they haven't got a clue, to be honest.
But I mean, they are making some strides, right, to
100%.
stop this. So,
100%.
For example,
go on.
Those fried chicken.
I knew it was coming. I knew it.
I bet there's so many people up and down the country.
I think it's incredible ingenious
past them, about to stab someone, but they're like, wait, look. So they read the
I
the
think
thing
it's
and
ingenious
they say,
idea, isn't it?
I don't know what came over me.
Put that in your knife for a wing, yeah?
Put down your knife, pick up a wing.
Pick up a wing.
So what do you think about that? I mean, that was a huge backlash. I mean, there's comedy kind of material for
I think it's
for weeks.
Gone. I want to hear your
Go
thoughts.
on.
Yeah.
I think it's ingenious idea.
Yeah.
For somebody that's disconnected from the reality, they're going to think, oh, this is really good. So for them, kudos to them.
Yeah.
They tried. But realistically, stupid. Realistically, is a waste of money. Realistically, the money could be invested into, services, more mentors. However,
The services have been slashed over the last.
However,
10
when
years.
you know what happens in certain spaces, and certain spaces think that they're doing good, rather they should consult people who are really doing the work before they step out and do.
A barrister once told me, he's involved in a lot of public law cases. He said, governments don't make policies based on logic or research. Normally, they just do things so they can be seen to be doing things.
PR campaign.
Yeah. So, it's
But
just
this is like.
I mean, there was a complete flop in the PR,
Yeah.
even in the PR sense, because everyone was taking the mick.
But you know what? This is a fundamental discussion that I've been thinking about. Is that how disconnected our policymakers, commissioners are with grassroots? You me and
this fits for everything, really. It's not just for kind of youth issues. It's for climate change issues, for drug policy. It's for even terrorism, counter-terrorism policy. All of these things are so far away from actual science and people researching on the in the universities, in the kind of criminology departments or whatever.
And this comes down to like who are kind of their background. So those policymakers, those funders, those people who are like funding projects, what is their background? And sometimes their background, they're not from like urban city London. Sometimes I meet them, they're not from urban city London. They haven't got a clue. They're trying to figure out, and that's a bigger issue in terms of, I guess, people who come a lived experience being in those positions. Alhamdulillah, like we have got people who becoming academics now and pushing that. We've got brothers like AbdulKarim as well, like pushing that through. So it needs a lot more of people with lived experience to take up those positions or become advisors.
Can I be honest? It's a lonely space.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that when people make it to, whether it's in policy or they control a board or, they make it into central government or whatever it is, they make it to those spaces there, it's very lonely. So when you're advocating in those spaces for the communities that you serve, because you have to go back into those communities and they're going to hold you to account, sometimes you're fighting a losing battle because they just don't get it. Like you'd be like, this is where you need to be, and they'll find every angle where it doesn't seem to fit with their overall plan. Yeah. So the challenge is, and it's a call to action, that more, it shouldn't be just, even though the grassroots is a very safe space for youth workers, for youth practitioners to be. Many of us, because I'm included in that village, we need to start climbing the ladder to make change at the top. Yeah, and it shouldn't be a lonely space where one person pops up and everything's on their shoulders, because they'll fight a losing battle.
Some people might say, it's impossible to change. They might have this kind of maybe I don't call it defeatist mentality, but they might think, the people in parliament or central government, they don't care. It's impossible to change. What's the point in even trying? What would you say to that kind of argument?
So I've got two responses. I think adding to what AbdulKarim was saying, 100%, it is quite a lonely space, and hence why I kind of had to think in terms of my kind of progression ladder as well, and the realistic, what's being realistic. And I've always kind of stayed middle ground and being, I guess, not frontline, but some balance between frontline and then kind of being involved in strategy and, and supporting directors and so forth. Also, I think, coming back to what AbdulKarim was saying, there's a lot more collaborative work. Like, I knew of AbdulKarim for a while, but we've never worked together. And I know there's others like AbdulKarim that I would love to work with. And it's about
his street cred, yeah?
His street cred, yeah.
I ain't got no street cred. It's gone out the window.
But there's so many.
After coming on here.
But even through my own kind of work, I came across so many, like, mashallah, like amazing youth workers, practitioners. I think the other day I met a sister who, like, delivers conflict resolution workshops, and I was like, "You're needed, my sister." And she's a practicing sister. She, graduated from madrasa, from an alima course. And I said to her, I said, "You're needed in the community. You're needed in the community." And I realized, but everyone's doing their own venture.
Yeah.
and there's not enough collaborative work.
You hit the nail on the head, and I think maybe there needs to be a space where brothers or like-minded individuals get together.
Yeah.
Because that village, that space, that community is your anchor.
Yeah.
And then when you, correct me if I'm wrong, when you're on the front lines and you're working with the young people and you're picking up a lot of their trauma, a lot of their issues, you get burnout. And then when you go into these senior spaces, you're like, and then you got to deal with that baggage. You need a place where you need your family. You need your tribe where you can go back to and just unload. And that's why for me, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed me with a colleague, very close colleague, who he's done frontline youth work and he's climbed quite high in his career, and we try and make change at the top in our spaces, and we bounce off each other. But if we had when we talk about, we actually map out who can we work with, who can we collaborate with, because they do it.
Yeah, and that's what to be honest, that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to stay connected with imams and Muslim institutions to kind of support them, upskill them to able to deliver quality youth engagement programs. Because alhamdulillah, they're doing that at the moment. So I'm always like on some sort of WhatsApp and texting them training and so forth. But I do feel like people like AbdulKarim, bringing him involved to train imams, train the committees, because youth work and work with young people is a whole different paradigm, a whole different kind of framework.
You know what some people think it is? It's table tennis and pool.
Yeah, I get cussed all the time, man.
Wait a second.
When they see me play FIFA, they go, "What you learn?" And you can't. No, honestly, and I'm like, no, it's more than that. Do you know what I mean? But it's interesting. Is that that's what it's about. And even now, alhamdulillah, a lot of the Masjids, I can see, alhamdulillah, during the summertime, they've done a lot of youth project. But it's about raising a bar now and having a lot more, engagement that has a meaningful impact on them.
The thing about that is, I think maybe things are progressing, because if we look back maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, it was like youth work, it wasn't even a conversation. It wasn't even
young people in the masjid was only time was Tarawih sitting at the back. Or Jummah at the back. That's it. That's the only time you see young people.
So it's incredible.
That was my experience, and hence why I never went to a masjid till later on in my life when I started practicing.
But alhamdulillah, we are seeing that transition. And people are getting it now, because and I think unfortunately it's taken maybe a few young people to pass in communities for imams, for masajids, for organizations to be like, okay, what can we do? And there are some imams that I've seen who are, Allahumma barak, taking a mantelpiece, running youth organizations. And I'm just like, Allahu Akbar, you've gone, you've studied, you've come back, and you've not just been a da'i, which is nothing wrong with. Like, I celebrate all the people at Tulab al-Ilm. But this brother here, he's gone the extra mile, not just to be a da'i, but to run a youth organization solely. And I said, you know what? That's the future. You know what I mean? That's the future.
The change, alhamdulillah, the change is there. Because even students...
some people are, some youth workers I speak to, they're quite more maybe cynical or pessimistic about the future. They're thinking that we might see some kind of practicing young people, but even them, they have so many issues, and we only see like 5%, and the rest of the people are going further and further away from the deen. And
so if we're talking about youth violence, that's what. If we're talking about practicing, that's that's a big conversation. And maybe because I'm a youth worker, I sympathise with young people, young Muslims. It's hard being young in this day and age. Oh my God! In our day, my day is the 80s/90s, early 2000s. The peer pressure was there. You had to have a nice pair of trainers, a decent tracksuit, fresh trim, and that was it.
Bang and fade.
Afro my day. But now, social media, this drip culture,
What's
brothers
drip
and
culture?
sisters. Okay, now we're going to boost the street cred, right?
Have you got a bucket?
Let me get my notepad.
So, like to just look fly, look flashy, expensive clothes, expensive clothing, this whole image that they portray on social media is so embedded that even our young Muslim brothers and sisters are affected. It's you have to understand, they're young people trying to navigate through society, and social media is a massive part of society. Where I'm on social media every day, like going through Instagram or whatnot, and I grew up without it. these young people, some of them don't know a life without social media.
Yeah.
Complete
so it's
digital
integral.
natives.
Yeah. So for them, that social footprint has to be a certain way. And that will also impact how they're viewed in school, how they're viewed in their local area.
Also affects young women disproportionately. They talk about compare and despair on Instagram and these kind of Photoshop images.
For me, when I think about social media, I think social media is just the platform. The underlying issue for me is that emotions and that emotional intelligence that they're unable to govern, I guess, their feelings. Are you with me? Stuff around like what does social media gives you? Social media gives you that instant gratification. I'm easily to put a picture out there, and I get a few likes, and I feel accepted.
Dopamine hit.
Yeah, that's scientific. But I want to keep it basic for the viewers. It's like I put a picture out there, I get a likes. Even we're talking about practicing. We're not even talking about non-practicing. We're talking about genuinely practicing. Is putting it out there, and I get a few likes, and I get a sense of satisfaction. And I was thinking this recently that even amongst practicing Muslim, this whole thing about showing off and, you know, putting things out there, your personal life and so forth, it's like become so grey now or even missing because it's become the norm. It's okay now, it's okay, but they don't realise the effects is happening and that actually is against our true nature. Are you with me? Like, for example, Riyah, we talk about development of showing off, Riyah, self-amazement. You know, these are like disease of the hearts. So we like put pictures out there, and these are some of the things that
it just accelerates bad akhlaq and bad habits and problems of the ego and the nafs.
So when I talk about youth programs, you know, one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment is design a youth program. Like use all my years of youth work and use all my little bit of Islamic knowledge I've learned around tarbiyah, around the issue around the heart, issue around the, you know, looking at the soul, looking at our human makeup, you know, not just physical being, but also our psychological, spiritual, emotional, and how do we, because these are the challenges that young Muslims are going through, you know, and that's probably my kind of concern more, is about how do we help young Muslims with the youth work framework, the language that youth work use, with the solution that I think Islam offers, by using the youth work model as a methodology to tackle those issues.
Okay, I learnt drip. Okay. I want you to teach me a few more words. I think Abdul Jaleel had a test for us.
You know what? I can't
Where's
remember
that
them.
test?
I can't.
You can get out of your phone now.
If I like,
You can get out your phone if you want.
if I get
Go on.
my phone.
What is it? Old school words?
Test of
Well, you know what?
if you know the lingo.
There's some list that someone made. Yeah, it was interesting, and I just kind of looked at the list. Yeah, and they had like people like job,
Job. I know what job means.
What's job?
on job,
Oh, on job.
On job,
Yeah.
op.
That's new.
Is op new?
Yeah.
Op
Yeah.
means an opponent.
Opponent, opposition.
Adversary.
What's this? Okay.
You got
See,
skeng,
I know. Skeng
Skeng.
means a weapon, gun.
leng. I only found out that one the other day. Leng.
Leng is the bullet that goes in the gun.
No, I thought. Yeah, it is that. Yes, it's something like that. Shooting someone or something.
Okay.
Leng. I thought leng meant like tasted nice.
Yeah.
No, that's peng.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No rhymes there.
Do you know what? I try. Like,
should be the youth worker
I
here,
don't
man.
even
Come
try,
on.
man. I don't even try to keep up because
It's
honestly,
too much.
when you try to pull it off in front of young people look at you
Yeah.
thinking, "Nah, man, allow
They
it."
think
Let
this
me
guy's
tell
a
you a
bit.
story. Let me tell you
What's
guys a
he trying-
story.
he's
I was
trying
with
too
a
much.
young
Plus,
person.
you don't know the
I was with a young
lingo.
person the other day, yeah, and I had to take him to a workshop, and he was like, Kareem, let me just go and link my cousin quick. I got to go bust a shot. So I got to go sell some drugs. I was like, bro, I'm with you as a youth worker. You think you're gonna bust a shot with me, bro? No, please, Kareem, I need to bust it. I said, no, we're gonna go to this workshop. Cut a long story short, it goes, okay, can I Ross it? I'm thinking, I just said you're not gonna go bust a shot. What do you want from me? He goes, no, Kareem, can I Ross it? I said, what does that mean? He goes, I can light my cigarette. I said,
You didn't know what Ross means.
I know what Ross means. Ross it. I was like, what? It's
Ross from bun it, innit?
It's a Caribbean thing. Yeah, I know Ross, but so
Yeah,
Ross
sure you
it. I do. That was just like raw. That's when I knew.
That's the dangerous thing of the risky thing of using young people's lingo, because if you use it in front of them, you might end
It's not
up.
authentic, isn't it? It's not authentic.
Yeah.
Like,
You might not know the latest, the new kind of lingo.
Unless it creeps in.
You might end up looking a bit photosynthesis.
Yeah.
Unless it creeps, like, you know when you're around young people all the time, and it will creep into your vocab. So like, what's the word that crept in the other day? Even my wife used it.
You're dead.
Get some milk on the way home.
No, I can't remember, but there's one that crept in.
Shot some milk on the way home.
Nah, shot's normal. That's normal. That's normal.
Yeah. So go on. What are the other words? Pagan, someone who
that's a bit of
someone who's a polytheist.
I actually said that the first time, you know, and the youth goes, "No, I don't mean it like that." I said, "That's what it means." You mushrik. Pagan op. What's that? Pax. Have you heard that one?
Pax. Yeah.
Yes.
Plural of pack.
Nah. So they're saying like, if say for example, may Allah forbid, I kill you, I say Abdul Jaleel pack, which means like, yeah, he's smoked, he's dead.
Okay.
I was
like, is it like from like packed up?
I don't know where it comes from, but it's just, I said, oh wow,
kick the bucket.
Yeah, do it.
Which one is it?
Go. I wanted to press it myself. Now I know which one it is. I'm gonna jump and press it.
You have to earn access to these buttons here, man. Not everyone can.
What's some crazy words that I've heard? Yeah, Packers.
Where's your list, man? You had your list.
It's on my phone.
Someone get his phone. Stay there. We'll get. Max will get your phone for you. All right, leave it then. Leave it. Yeah.
Nah. I gotta bring you around some mutes. Jazz you up a little bit.
Dench.
That's an East thing, isn't it?
You don't know, man.
That's an East. That's South. That never really.
Technically, I'm younger than you. I think that's why.
That never really made it down south like that. No one really said the word dench in south.
Yeah.
So
I made it up.
I don't even keep it up. Like I said, I don't even.
You hear it and I'm like, all right, yeah, I got it now. Because obviously when they're talking amongst themselves, I've got to kind of like be like,
it is quite, quite profound though, some of the stuff they say, and there's just ability to evolve the language. But what I'm worried about is over the years. Remember 1984 dystopic kind of feature? They were like, there's this thing called Newspeak, where the vocabulary.
What the heck are you talking about?
So there's dystopic kind of future novel, right?
Oh, it's a book.
Yeah, depicting like authoritarianism and everyone's scared of the government.
Like an Orwell kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's written by George Orwell.
Oh, so George Orwell. Okay, yeah.
So in that they had something called Newspeak, where the new vocabulary of that time is so reduced that the idea is, if you don't have certain words in your vocabulary, you can't think or do those things. If you don't have the word revolution, for example, you won't be able to rise up and all that kind of stuff. So that's the danger with some people with maybe a malicious intent to try and kind of tweak language that people or we use, right? It can be so subtle, from like government messaging like about extremism and all that kind of stuff to maybe some overt things, That's the dangerous thing about, I suppose, kind of language evolving. If you don't know who's in the steering wheel.
Well, you know what? There's an interesting discussion.
And obviously, there's shaitan as well in the background. You're trying to push people to away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe that's behind why pagan.
Through slang.
Yeah, maybe.
No, pagan's a bad word. No one wants to be a pagan. So it might be, you know what I mean? It's a bad word.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I think there was this discussion around, young practicing Muslim using certain slang and so forth. And I think they were like...
Was it like a bad thing?
Yeah, like a bad thing and horrid, and it wasn't part of their...
it's not
identity
it's not
and
the
so forth. Yeah, and you know what? Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I've been thinking about this as well. Like, because I work with young Muslims or whatever, and they'll use certain. And do I like say I don't say those words and so forth? And like, I think young people should able to express themselves. appropriately in different setting and adapting to that. I think that's something that we need to kind of teach young people, because sometimes you're not going to use the same language you're from with someone senior to someone who's a very close friend of mine, and different setting and so forth. But also, I feel like these kind
I hear you, brethren.
yeah, but these kind of slang, I do feel like this is part of their identity. This is what they kind of express
I
themselves.
think it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
It's
I
not-
think
Yeah.
authentic and respectful.
Yeah.
So that's my limit. If it's disrespectful, then I draw the line.
Yeah.
However, if you're speaking your colloquial tongue, your local tongue, for example, even Arabic words have crept into road speak. For example, words like
Dunya.
wallahi, ahi, dunya.
Is that
It's in
true?
there.
Like even non-Muslims use that in
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah.
I've seen celebrities.
I heard
I've seen
that. I
celebrities
thought,
say like up in the dunya.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or say wallahi. Like that's a serious
but
one.
you
You
know what
see,
though?
if someone says to you, say wallahi, that's a big thing. Like, right, if you lie on that, it's like lying on,
Even
like
if
your mum's
someone's
graves.
a pagan.
Even say wallahi.
Aki's a very popular one. That's quite.
I
even
heard
in
that,
music,
some
even
people
in
saying
music,
that.
like people use the term Aki, but it's quite interesting because it shows you how much they're interacting with young Muslims, if that makes sense, or their social.
I think that
circle.
is a very high potential kind of avenue for dawah if Muslims get cultural capital and currency and respect, that they're able to influence, they're able to be role models, eventually. In different places.
Unfortunately, it's spun on its head, and generally it's looked at in a negative connotation. The whole Muslim element. This is something that I've tried to actively work against in terms of why is it that historically it's like the black community, we shine when we're negative towards each other. When we're talking about how we kill each other, we stab each other, and that's celebrated and glorified. And then the element of the Muslimness now embedded in that, so it's like ak, but you're talking about ak when you're talking about drugs. You're talking, say wallahi when you're gonna go and shoot someone, or dunya is associated, even though it's worldly, it's like it's not highlighting the negatives of this world. Like it's crazy in the dunya. So for me, you're right, but unfortunately the tint that Muslims have given our influence, so to speak, has been a negative one. And unfortunately, we have to
How do you untap the positive?
We have
potential?
to own our spaces and challenge. To be honest, so when I've heard some young people go, say wallahi, you're gonna go lick him down, like no, you have to challenge that. Like, what do you mean? How are you gonna use Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name in that space? You can't let that go. Does that make sense? Similarly with the N word, for me, it's a no. I'm not really on that. So when I hear young people saying it, I'm like, do you know what that is? And and I challenge that. So, but what we have is young people, maybe who aren't equipped, who because their Muslimness is celebrated in the culture, it's like, I'm accepted now, rather than us giving them the tools to be like
influence as well.
All right, you're talking about Allah, or you're saying, even though ak isn't really a Muslim word, this means brother, but it's associated with Muslim. How do we reframe that? We have to be bold, because if we saw Theresa May, or I'm allowed to say those people's name, or anybody like that.
I have to spit 3
She's not
times to
even
your
the
left.
Prime Minister no more. Start using the words inappropriately, we'll give her a hard time. So, social media, Muslim Twitter would rip her to shreds. So I think we have to be as confident in ourselves to say, okay, our part of ourself is being misrepresented here. Let's not stand for that.
There's so much potential there for good. I mean, a lot of people say this about the US context, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved Islam in America, not through like scholars or Asian kind of immigrants, but through the black Muslim presence there. That's what really made Islam an American thing, a normal thing, and a part of the cultural fabric of America. Obviously there's issues with Nation of Islam and that kind of stuff, but a lot of them become mainstream as communities, the whole entire communities, and they have a lot of cultural capital. You look at Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah, he was like a global legend, but
rahimahullah,
I think there's pros and cons, and I think whoever goes into that, they need to really reflect on their values and what they really stand for. The issue is that when the people go in there, they don't know what they stand for. Because if they go into like social media or just and so forth and be amongst that kind of culture, and so it's like, what do you stand for in terms of your own values? Because the problem is when they go into it, they don't really have no values.
More important, they represent the core
Or maybe,
Yes.
or maybe
Yeah.
they do,
Yeah.
or maybe they
Terminology.
do, but it's the culture's so powerful, you acquiesced.
Yeah.
You succumb. You succumb like, rock. I want to be a part of this because this is cool. And we see even like practicing brothers, you know, who are Allahumma Barak, they were strong, they were qawi in the durus and whatnot on social media, you know, like getting pulled to the culture, the negative aspect of the culture. So it's like, how do we own that space without compromise?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Or
Because
how do we influence the mainstream culture in a positive direction?
I think it's possible. I do believe it's possible. One person who, you know, I believe, two people I believe demonstrated that. One, he passed away, rahimahullah, but like Ali Banat, for me, demonstrated what it means to be a humanitarian, what it means to be a Muslim, even though you're sick. So much so, that he was a social media influencer and passed away. And Muslims and non-Muslims, you know, mourned on his passing. And he was integral. He remained, you know, an integral. And everybody, whether you were a rapper, whether you were a social media influencer, a makeup artist, everybody felt his passing. So there is that there is that possibility.
Who was the other one? Who was the second?
I'm not gonna name. I'm not gonna name.
Okay.
But you know what's interesting about
Yourself.
that? And I think
No way, man.
what's interesting
One day, inshallah.
about maybe Ali Banat
Yeah, rahimahullah.
and others as well is that if you see them, is that they chose a field and they excelled in that field. You and me. And it's the kind of messaging that we are not putting to our young people, because we still kind of, and I see it amongst families and I see it amongst parents, that we have this kind of traditional career paths that we're still kind of pushing on young people, which I believe we should actually push young people. What is their strength?
100%.
And what is their strength, what they enjoy.
Are they going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an
There
accountant?
we go.
It's up to you. You can choose some.
You know, but every cultures have their different kind of
No, in the African, I'm pretty sure in the African and Asian culture, that's the three, right?
yeah.
The African culture, that's the same.
Or engineer.
Yeah.
And what?
Engineer.
Engineer. So,
So I think that, you know, it's about pushing, as you were saying, that how do we kind of get the positive, is that whatever they're going to do is, like I said,
Excel
having
in
the
that.
Excel values, find a space, excel in that, and be the best at it. You know, if you look at,
Be-
I don't want to mention celebrity names,
Muslim, like
Muslim
Khabib.
names. Yeah, I don't want to mention anyway.
Khabib.
Yeah, but whoever that is, if you see them, they perform at their elite and they perform at the best,
They
and
smash it.
and do the best they can. Does that make sense? Yeah, and the whole world is watching them, and whether we agree or disagree, people look towards it
As
as
a
him
role
as a
model.
Muslim.
Yeah.
and a
They
role
say as a
model.
Muslim and a role model. I see him. He's living on some values that
He's proud
governs
of
him.
them.
Yeah, and I think
Can we get
so.
Hadouken for that, please?
Yeah.
Hadouken. So, and I think that's what it is. It's about getting people to be. So when I work with young people, my own family, so I was like, what do you want to do? Does that make sense? And whatever it is you want to do, make sure you're the best at it and excel and become like people looking towards you and say, yeah, he actually perform. You know, that's his expertise, that's his field, and do you know what? He's amazing at it.
Do you think you mentioned Khabib? Do you know what influence does he have? Do you reckon on the people that young people that you? Is it that demographic that
You know you're gonna get slaughtered,
appeals to
innit?
him?
Who,
Why?
me?
You know, even talk about Khabib. Yeah, because you know, like, I've been reading some comments and they're like, "Oh, how can you say that?" And
I
we
think-
look at the negative so much.
I think, to be honest, all right, I'm not going to talk about whether MMA is halal or haram. Yeah, he's in the public eye, and from what I see from the apparent, he tries to be a practicing Muslim. He's not shy, and for me, that's powerful in an era where a lot of people are running away from, you know, being, you know, a man, you know, rojula.
yeah.
Like,
Well, some
show
people embarrassed of the Muslim.
yeah, he's very much comfortable. Not just comfortable, he excels in his comfortability. Where, you know, sometimes men, we compromise in shaking women's hands, or he's not on it. He demonstrates, I'm a
But
Muslim
is
man.
that kind of character, that kind of icon, is he appealing to the young people that you guys kind of work with?
you know-
Or is it maybe
You know what's interesting about
More
Khabib?
practicing
You know what's
or-
interesting about Khabib? Yeah? And I don't think it's interesting. I think when I think about Khabib, yeah, I think the Muslim Ummah is
me hear
my
this.
kind of
Let me hear
hypothesis.
this.
Yeah.
Let me hear this. Let me hear
Is-
this.
Let me get ready. Wait.
That the Muslim Ummah.
He's looking for a
Why am I saying
hero.
the Ummah? Because that's quite a big term, isn't it? I think the Muslims, particularly I see it, I come across in the UK, maybe in the community, or just generally over the world. But we're looking for someone to represent the
knew
Muslims
you were
on a
gonna say
public sphere. And
The
I
next
think,
Muhammad.
you know, and even though I don't like comparing, because I think some people like, even though I love Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah, it's just that as a community, over the years, we've just been degraded in whatever sphere you want to talk about, you know, whether that's through like so-called terrorism, you know, in the political, you look at what's going on around the world. And when we see Khabib, who no one even followed MMA, no one probably cared about MMA before then, to have someone like Khabib, you know, who's a Muslim, and you see someone who's praying Salah, seeing someone who's saying Alhamdulillah, a word that we take, you know,
and he's
close
giving
to
good
our
messaging.
good
Obviously.
messaging. I think the community was like, mashallah, like, do you know what I mean, someone who's that.
I mean, I get that for the community, but what about the young people?
Yeah, young people, like,
A lot of
That
people
aren't
celebrate.
really
celebrating it.
A lot of
Yeah,
people
a lot of
celebrate.
people, yeah.
To be honest, there are quite a few celebrities, footballers,
Yeah.
you know, who are
Mo Salah.
Muslim. Yeah.
Pogba.
But no, who are
Those are the only two Muslim footballers.
no, you got like you got like, for example,
don't follow
Ibtija Muhammad,
football.
for example,
Yeah.
you know, she openly, you know, Muslimah.
The American one.
Yeah, so there have been, but I don't think any has celebrated as Khabib. Maybe because he, you know, whooped Conor McGregor or whatever not, and Conor McGregor seemed to be an enemy of, you know, the values that we all love, you know, Islam. So that was kind of gave him the fuel or the amp for everyone to be like, look what he did for the Muslims. But for me personally, you know, it's important to have individuals who represent you in a public space.
Yeah.
Whether it's social media, whether it's, you know, the mainstream, and not compromise on that.
That's
And
is extremely important. I mean, if I think about myself, people our age, we didn't. A lot of Asians, for example, young Asian Muslims, we had nothing other than no counterculture of our own that would say, this is how you can be non-white and excel and thrive. So a lot of young people turned to, for example, hip hop culture and Asians. So it was something that arose in the Black American kind of cultural milieu. But that's the thing that a lot of us attach to.
Can I
Some
ask a
of
question?
us kind of even Afro-Caribbean culture.
But can I ask a question? Because this is amazing. So when I grew up with quite a few Asians, you know, because, for example, I was as a Caribbean Muslim growing up, it was either my traditional culture or Islamic. There was there wasn't clear synergy. But then when I would go to some of my South Asian friends' houses, like I would be like, "Wow, what's this? ZTV?"
Yeah.
No, wallahi, I was amazed. I was like, "What the heck? You got your own culture on TV?" So within that, they need to talk about Imran Khan. I can't remember his name, but everybody from my South Asian friends will talk. Wasn't that clear? Wasn't that identity strong? Because they loved it, and they will talk about some of the Bollywood movies. I just want to know,
it was
clear?
kind of a
It's
foreign
interesting.
thing. It was a foreign thing
Okay.
until for us, I mean personally, it might sound funny, but the thing that gave us kind of an example of a British non-white counterculture that we could tap into was, it might sound silly, but goodness gracious me, remember that?
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah.
I didn't even have connection with that,
Just
you know?
seeing like Asian people on TV just doing stuff and not being the norm, not being white, right? That gave a lot of young, Asians at least in like school and that kind of stuff, some kind of, okay,
You got
there's some
Abdul Jaleel, I need to tell you what you got to say, bro. You got to lay out the bag, bro.
So
I think
grew
that's
up
what Khabib is doing in terms
yeah.
of people. For now, their Muslim values that maybe they think are not welcome in wider society. If they say some kind of role model, some kind of example of a counterculture to the norm values, the normal identity, if they see that in a way where I can live there, I can thrive in that space, then that's really powerful. Even though, obviously, like you said, the details of the rulings about MMA and so on, but look at the person in terms of...
But I think that, personally, I've got a couple of things to say.
Let it out, bro. Let it out, bro.
Salman's one, is that we go into details because we have a very perfection fallacy. We want everything to be perfect, the role models to be perfect, and so forth. And if they're not that, then we won't accept it at all. And that is problematic because you're never going to find anyone like that. Does that make sense? In this day and age, it's just not going to happen. Yeah? That perfect person was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions, radiallahu anhum ajmain. So that was the role model, and the 4 imams and the scholars that came by. So I think sometimes we have that notion, and so because we have that notion, we're quick to kind of shoot them down and say, well, how can they be a role model and so forth and etc. But the point with Khabib, what's interesting is when we say role model, what do we mean? For me, I mean it's the values that he stood for. Yeah. It's the values of someone insulting your culture, someone insulting your religion, someone insulting your parents. These are some of the Islamic values we hold dear to, and when we find someone who's actually standing up for that, we actually join in with that struggle. And I think
that's not the norm. The norm is don't care what anyone says about anything.
Yeah.
Or the norm is I'm gonna cuss you back.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna go. So for example, just with the Khabib thing, when Conor was gonna fight Floyd.
Yeah.
You saw them going tit for tat. Khabib was the complete opposite. He was a complete, he demonstrated integrity. I was going to say no. He demonstrated integrity. And I think a lot of people recognized there are still men of values out there in the mainstream, which is what the Muslim quote unquote ummah is looking for. And I say this in the lightest term, someone who is closest to the Prophet in behavior in that space. So
it's just an issue of good characteristics and values that are against the norm. For example, ghira, ghira, having a kind of protective jealousy over your female relatives and a wife or daughters or whatever, right? I heard this guy who spent a lot of time with Khabib.
Will Harris.
I don't know, I forgot his name.
Will Harris,
He was saying that, a lot of people think, because that's completely anathema in kind of Western culture to have any kind of protection over a woman. It's seen as kind of against her, whatever. You all know the thing, But that culture that Khabib showed that person, he said, it showed me another way to live. It showed me another way that a society can thrive and can work. People are happy, things working, you know what I mean? So just little things like that, they add up. So if a young person sees that there's a something from the sunnah that can be implemented in real life today, not just in a bubble, not just in the madrasa or in the masjid or in the books, that has a massive impact on them, I think. And you're right about the perfectionist fallacy. Just because he's not perfect doesn't mean you can't take good characteristics.
And I think that's and if you look at
because either him that kids are going to be looking up to, or some completely, don't mean to point at you, but some completely not even Muslim, no good qualities that come from him at all.
I just want to come back to AbdulKarim's point
on ZTV.
Yeah, ZTV.
Please, I was waiting for you.
So what's interesting, for me, I guess, and I'll show you a little bit about me, I guess. And so I grew up in a very dominantly black and white community, and I was the only few Asian in a community. But for me, I used to hate Bollywood, man.
Is that why your name was AJ?
Press it.
They used to call you Abdul Jaleel.
Press it.
Yeah. So,
thank you.
So, but for me, what was interesting, I was very much inclined to hip hop. And I became very embedded in it, where I had friends who became into the music industry. I had friends who became grime artists and so forth. But what was interesting about hip hop, and even originally around grime, even though how you interpret grime, I think it's the whole kind of struggle, rebellious against the struggle culture and just rebellious against. In the Bangladeshi community, one of the most popular artists that everyone listened to was Tupac.
No way.
Honestly, Ty Hamlet's Tupac. If you ask them who would you side over Biggie and Tupac, 100% they would say Tupac because they like that.
Because his surname was Shakur.
No.
So there was this kind of. So there was this kind of I guess the struggle culture, and I think I adopted that kind of notion and understanding. So I was appealed to Malcolm X. I was appealed to Huey P from Black Panthers, so those are the kind of things I think for me as a youth. And that was the only, I felt I guess I went from my own identity crisis, but that was the identity I adopted and I jumped on that. And I lived in it for years till alhamdulillah I started practicing because I realized, then you obviously start judging, like you start evaluating values and what do the really values and the end product as well.
Can I ask
Someone
something?
says, yeah.
Did you used to call him Tupacul?
No, I didn't.
Who? You're gonna have to break it down for me. What
I
does
called
that
him
mean?
Machiavelli.
Do you know what? I read something the other day. Tupac wasn't really Machiavellian, you know. He wasn't.
I don't know, man.
No, Machiavelli's very secretive, shadowy kind of character.
He had an album, innit? Called Machiavelli.
No, that was
Yeah,
just the
but he
name
wasn't.
of the-
Yeah.
But in terms of his approach, it's very
Yeah.
much the opposite.
Machiavellian.
He wasn't
Yeah.
Machiavellian at all.
So that was the kind of interesting. I think in a community, and I can only talk about Hamlets. I think a lot of, but however, there was some. I guess jumped on the whole Bollywood music. I guess.
I just thought because I never
some
had
people they merged kind of hip hop and Bollywood.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I just found it amazing, and you know, being Caribbean, the only thing I would see really, well, reggae, a bit like a sound thing, but we never had like a dedicated channel for.
Yeah.
Other than Americanized culture, which obviously, you know, being a young, you know, black person growing up, you could identify with some of it. But for example, when I saw that, it just was another world, and I was like, right, you're lucky you lot have that. And then when I go to certain shops with my friends when they're buying food, they're like, it'll be on, and they'll be like, oh, that's this and that's that. And then what blew my mind, this is why you lot will have your own versions of certain American films.
I didn't watch it.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like you have your, and I'll be like, how do you guys do it? So for me, growing up with...
There's this new film that came out. It's about this little alien that arrives, this little extraterrestrial being that comes down and befriends a little kid. Really? I think I've seen that. Yeah, it's called Jadoo or something.
Yeah, they're really pushing the boundaries out now, you know. They're really pushing the boundaries out.
But as a young person, I found it amazing.
Yeah.
But then just hearing what you're saying, that, you know, and hearing what you're saying, people gravitating towards, like, you know, the black struggle culture.
Yeah,
I think the
100%
black community has been oppressed more and longer as in the UK and former colonies and stuff. I think that's part of the reason why. Like, literally, the culture was kind of, they call it epistemicide, you know, that complete removal of the culture from a people, such that they have nothing, no connection.
Epistemicide.
Yeah, and do you know what?
I'm taking it
Do you know,
home with
you know
me
when
still.
they, so I went to, what's interesting, when they talk about youth, come back to youth violence. When they talk about youth violence, they really talk about the systematic discrimination upon black, when they talk about gangs, particularly young black men involved in gangs, they do talk about the systematic discrimination that took place over academics.
Okay.
So there's one academic, I went to his kind of seminar, and he was discussing this, and you know, and he was giving a counter argument around. So he looked at slavery and the period of slavery over like 100 years or whatever the case, and then eventually, you know, the black community moving into like inner cities of like Brooklyn and Chicago and so forth. And he was saying the correlation between their ancestors of being against the systematic discrimination and continuation.
It was a
Yeah,
post-traumatic
it's inherited.
post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of, and that's a massive thing. And what was interesting, I think I was discussing with you, is that if that's happening to the black community, what's happening to like young Muslims who are going through some sort of Islamophobia, discrimination, and what would it be?
I think there's a lot of
for like
lessons
10,
to learn.
15 years or 20 years time, like in terms of what would be their mindset. Already, people already struggle to uphold some sort of like their Muslim identity in a workplace environment, or hold their identity just in a public sphere. How would it be if it, you know, yes, it's just a kind of interesting kind of reflection, to be honest.
I mean, so going back to solutions, right? I want to think about in terms of solutions was, AbdulKarim, you mentioned a few words that kind of reminded me of a few theories I have. That is, you mentioned words like village, family, tribe, you even mentioned. And I think one major cause of so many of these issues, social ills we have today, problem of youth violence and so forth is one of them, is one of the main causes is the breakup of the extended family and tribal units that human beings have lived in for the most of our kind of history. Since the time of Adam alayhi salam, even in the Western world, or what is now known as the West, your home, who your family is it would be made up of like 50 to 100 individuals, right? Not just geographic proximity, that these are the people you live with, but just generally who you regard as your own. You look out for them. You have a sense of shame not to let them down. The older brothers, the older cousins, or whatever. You each kind of keep each other in check. And the breakup of that system, the atomization, right, through architecture, through the kind of different housing projects, splitting people up into the nuclear family, husband, wife, 2.4 children. That has led to so many issues, and I think the problem of youth violence is one of many other issues that stem from part of this, because young people are growing up now separated from the broader kind of tribal unit, the broader family, the broader village. The old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. Now this child, it's these human beings, these human societies that were so interconnected are split up into little homes and houses or estates, and all of the interactions are mediated through either a government body or a private corporation. So your education, your cultural production, your entertainment. If you have a dispute, who do you go to get that resolved? Your healthcare, even sometimes, and guidance, just going to the elder in your broader family structure or your tribe and that kind of stuff. It's completely been broken up and atomized, and now people are in their little silos.
I think you've looked at it from a macro lens, and that is societal ills and the societal challenge that we have in a very built up cosmopolitan city like London or Birmingham or even Chicago or whatnot. I think unless you're going to have a structural change of society, that's too big a challenge to deal with for a solution. And for me, we have to I'm going to use your word, atomize it. And one of the key things that I found is that the moral compass of society is swinging in that all over the place. And if we're able to, we have Islam that guides our moral compass. And enabling us to know right from wrong, good from bad, what to do from what not to do. And that there, for me, is key. If we're able to enable the moral compass of young people to be upon the haqq, they're less likely to get involved in situations which is going to put them or themselves at harm. Their risk goes down. So, for example,
part of that is having them feel that they're part of something bigger, not just looking out for themselves. That individualistic kind of.
But
this is what liberalism.
But I believe that a person has to hold himself to account, and if we're not taught to hold ourselves to account, then we've got other things to blame. And the saying, hold yourself to account before you're held to account. So everything stems from the self first and foremost, because you could be in a family, you could be in a macrocosm and be that bad apple because you're choosing to be that bad apple for whatever the circumstance.
But how do you get that tarbiyah? How do you get that nurturing?
So
even about holding yourself to account.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so something that I've been I guess your approach, what you're saying, I feel is quite isolated. Because I'm not
saying it as a solution. I'm just saying this is part of where the problem came from in the first place.
But when we have the argument and we kind of look at that, some people say that's their problem. It's their family problem. It's family issues. And when we have that, people think, well, it's not my problem. It has nothing to do with me. And this is what I feel as a Muslim community we've gone down to. I saw this a charity campaign on one of the Islamic channels, and it was like a youth program or a community program based in the UK, and they tried to raise money, and I don't think they raised that much compared to other charities. And it kind of raised questions for me in terms of, I'm not saying humanitarian aid is not important. I'm saying definitely it's important.
It's definitely easier to fundraise for the.
But we need to kind of look into our community. Is that yes, we do support. We do support and donate based on emotions, but do we support and donate based on the strategic look in terms of our community? And that's something that's lacking. Hence why people like myself and AbdulKarim have to go and work for a non-Muslim organisation and do the work. If me and AbdulKarim and we bring other team together, we were supporting, able to do the work, we could have a massive impact.
Yeah.
And I think that's so.
But like you said before, it needs you to come together and synergize.
Yeah. So coming back to the thing about the point you were saying about family, so forth, is that everyone has to. That's why I was saying the problem is a layered problem, because it's an individual problem, which we're talking about now, the individual tarbiyah. Then we look at the interpersonal, so about the families and so forth. Then it's about organizations, the existing organization, the Masjids. What are they putting in place to support those young people? You know, we've got, like, one of the issues I have young people is a lot of young people are going through doubts about Islam.
Yeah.
They're having a massive identity crisis. They're questioning their faith because they're being pumped all this information around them, and they're thinking, hold on, there could be some truth to this.
But you know what is off that, and if the spaces of guidance, the masajid, the institutes aren't speaking the language that the young people understand, then those shubahat, those doubts won't be cleared up.
Yeah.
And just bolting onto what you're saying, bolting onto what you're saying, and that's why what you're saying is so poignant, because those spaces are supposed to connect down.
Yeah.
And you know, in terms of a moral compass or their moral lens, it's like the most important thing is, let's feed some poor people in a country far beyond our own, because we see that as a priority rather than the morals looking at the young people in their community as a priority.
And when AbdulKarim was talking about the moral compass, for me, I take it as that's your fitrah. So where is the space where we could kind of, people go through a development process, mentoring process, where we could help them to find their moral compass? Where is the space for that? It's either and for me, it's a strategy of supporting the existing institutions or support people to create that space. Does that make sense? And I think it has to be too, because young people, you know, they don't want to be indoors on Friday night. We used to have a youth project, and we used to open to 10 in the evening on a Friday, ram-packed, 40 young people.
What do you used to do?
We used to get pizza, we used to have talk to them, we used to have activities, we used to have whatever
Snooker and table tennis.
whatever the point is, I rather than be in a space that is supervised,
absolutely,
than be in a space out on the street.
Yeah.
And it meant, like, I was going home late because I was finished at 10, but the thing is,
to thrive though, that needs us to feel like the neighbours' kids, the kids down the street, the kids that are making a mess in the back of the mosque, those are like my kids.
Yeah. Do you know what it is though? I think now there is the appetite though.
Yeah.
Now, you know, if an individual was to set up a project for young Muslims, parents, because parents are the ones that are so concerned for their children, they are the driving force now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've seen people, you know, go from very small projects to massive projects because it's like, where's the Muslim alternative? I don't want my kids getting involved in it. So there is that. I think now more than ever, there's been that scope to do 100%. Things. 3, 4, 5 years ago, 100%. It would have been like, oh God, and you look for support. Now I think there is that scope. However, so looking at solutions, you know, maybe it is about brothers like Abdul Jaleel, you know, brothers who have the frontline experience, who have the understanding, the strategic aims of, you know, how to engage young people. Maybe it's about brothers like yourself, you know, taking the mantelpiece and driving forward, because I guarantee you it's going to be a hard graft. And maybe I'm speaking about myself as well.
And there's other, and it's not just Masjids, it's organisation who have money and funding.
They need to dip in.
Because
Masjids and Muslim schools, they have, for example, a lot of space, especially schools after school time. Loads of space, they're empty. They can be used for this. I don't think any school, Muslim school, madrasa, masjid, is going to say no if they're given.
I don't know,
people, the resources.
I'll be honest with you, to be honest.
But if they have to train people themselves and do the stuff themselves, then they're going to say, oh, I've got a million other things to do.
We have to be, like, if I have to be honest, sometimes, I'm not saying all institutions, but some, I think it's more individuals rather than the institution. Individuals are kind of like, when you look at someone, you stereotype them. You're like, I don't really want them in the masjid.
Yeah.
I don't really want them in the school because they might trash the place. And we have all these kind of different thoughts that's going in our head. And
Speaking facts,
that's the issue. And it's about, sometimes we have to be non-judgmental.
Gonna mess up the carpet.
Yeah, we have to
No,
be
wallahi,
you
that's
have to be
literally.
non-judgmental. Like if people come in and they've got ear studs, then you got to just let them in and
Not
just
just that,
engage with
people are
them.
valuing, you know, items, stuff, bricks, carpet more than young people.
Yeah.
That's it, really. And you speak 100% my language. There is that stigma that if a young person comes into the masjid or they have cornrows, they've got an earring, they might have a tattoo, it's like we don't want them in here. We only want the young people who are attending the madrasa, hafiz al-Quran. Those young people want everyone else stay. Some masajid.
They look like lost causes.
Yeah, it's
Do
like
you know what I mean?
and the Prophet ﷺ was not like that. He engaged all.
Yeah, and just come back to what your point, Salman, as well, about the neighbours and so forth. I understand that some people may feel uncomfortable to approach a young person, you know, who may be on the street and say to them, look, you know, do you want to come to the masjid or whatever the case? And I understand that because sometimes you feel there is an age gap, you feel there's a gap of experience, but that doesn't prevent you to go to your masjid and say, look, why don't we set up a program?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't stop them being
It doesn't
proactive
have to
behind
be
the scene.
in the masjid.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be in the
Some people
masjid.
might feel maybe it's too much to go
Yeah,
into
I
a
know.
masjid.
This ain't like I'm not trying to put that much. I'm just
Bang,
thinking about
bang,
it
bang.
because you know what I'm.
It's
Only
like a
reason I say-
local football.
whatever the
kind
case.
of,
Yeah, but it's about probing and it's about asking those questions and it's about getting the people to say, look, can you lead on? Can you lead on this? Can you?
But can I
someone's
be
behind the
honest?
scene?
Can I be honest? Not every space or masjid or has the right people to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge because a masjid might be open and it's like, all right, who's going to run it?
Yeah.
And if, you know, you're a person who you've got family, you know, you got your work and then you have to give that extra time, which is beneficial. It's like there's so much given, but there's one thing I have found, and maybe this is a clarion call or call to action. We need more people to take this issue more seriously, to get involved and volunteer, because there are quite a few of us out there, but there's not enough because we have so much. We're a fast growing population in terms of our young people in this country, and there's not enough youth leaders.
And I think
Yeah.
the masjid, I think the importance of the masjid is because it happens to be one in different communities. If there's no space or no kind of appetite to do that stuff in the masjid, then I think people need to be trained to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? One thing I remember from when I was younger, the people at the guys at the local estate, they would have these kind of trips with older people from the same estate, right? And the estate was back then at least one of the last kind of vestigial remnants of that kind of community spirit, where you have people around living in the same area, you have a shared space, people know each other, people can look after each other's kids and that kind of stuff. And some young people in like my age, they would be hesitant to maybe do something too crazy because they're like, I don't want to let down the guys. You know, someone might see me from that estate, the older guys. I don't want to let them down.
Yeah.
That kind of feeling, you know. So the kind of feeling that you have someone, an older brother type person, you know what I mean, on a local level, because you can only do so much. You can only do as an individual, but empowering people in a local sense to build those bridges with your neighbors, with the people that come to your masjid, with the young people you do see and you do know, build that rapport. I think that is a more natural way to kind of, and I think that is what the stereotypical kind of gang member is looking for. They're looking for that sense of belonging. They're looking for that, you know, that brotherhood, that fraternity.
So
is that not the case?
Yeah. So when I mention a masjid, I'm not being specific to masjid. I'm saying really, and what I'm saying is a space for young people. The reason I mention a masjid because that's where we have the capacity and we have the space. The infrastructure is there to kind of develop and grow.
Do they even need a space though?
I think they do need a space because, and a space doesn't have to be a room. Is wherever the young people want to be to kind of be their comfortable self and be a space where you could have a dialogue, conversation, discussion. And that's what I actually mean.
So solutions-wise, let's kind of, there's a lot of good stuff been mentioned. If you were to summarize a few points in terms of how do we as a community, what would you say we focus on, right? Maybe 3 things focus on that you think would be good towards solving the problem of youth violence.
Of youth violence
Yeah.
or youth, because we talked about a lot of things.
Yeah. So youth violence, particularly, that's your expertise, right? Serious youth violence. So in terms of, because it's also connected to the issue of youth going away from the deen, young Muslims going away from the deen, or issues of gang culture or other types of criminality. But in terms of to give like maybe any organizations or decision makers, or even parents, watching or listening, what 3 pieces of advice would you think? I'm gonna ask you in a minute. So,
is it who's first?
Yeah, but my one, I guess, because I've been thinking about this for a few years in terms of what's the strategy for young Muslims. Where do we steer them? Where do we go? Who needs to be involved? Who needs to be driving this? So I think my angle would be this, from that angle, from young Muslims, because I think that's my main target group. That's my main concern. And within that, it affects those same young Muslims, practicing or non-practicing. They'll be involved in knife crime. They'll be involved in drug abuse. They'll be involved in those kind of things. And I guess my strategy is looking at the existing youth framework is to have small intervention over a long period. So rather than just having this spontaneous program, late night, we get some pizza and so forth. It's more kind of, for me, it's more evidence-based practice. And that's one of the things that I guess my advice to, and I've been saying to others as well, like, don't try and put together a program which you think will be beneficial to young people. Ask what be beneficial to them, and look at the data and the research that's already been done.
What does the evidence suggest?
So the evidence for me is, from my reading, is looking at me personally. So I'm trying to put together a program, and the program is a small intervention. So we look at a workshop style over 6 weeks, over 6 sessions, where we look at different challenges that young people go through. So the first thing we'll probably look at identity and identity crisis, and come back to what AbdulKarim was saying, their moral compass. So even that, what is their values? Where do they get their values from? Do you stand for those values? Do you call yourself to account? Look at the stuff around like just holding an account in terms of their own values, and how do they live by that, and look at that stuff around trauma. A lot of young people, young Muslims particularly, are leaving Islam not because they have an intellectual doubt about Islam, it's because they had a bad experience. And how do they unravel that? How do they untangle that? Because that is preventing them to becoming a upright Muslim. And so it's about going.
So you'd say small interventions
over a long period, and having that relationship, continue, because hopefully, inshallah, they could, at the end of the program, inshallah, we want to have, and this program is actually from my own experiences, my own challenges, my own kind of doubts, looking at other young Muslims as well, bringing that together. So that's really the solution. I feel that we need to have more evidence-based practice in our approach in terms of work with young people.
What do you reckon? What are your piece of advice in terms of
when Abdul Jaleel mentioned the sister who did the course, and then now she's doing conflict resolution. And what did he say? We need more people like you. For me, number one, we need more hands on deck. Where, for me, I think, specialists or youth practitioners in the Muslim community aren't favoured upon, aren't respected. And someone who goes into that field, it's like, that's a little field there. You're not a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, as you would say. So for me personally, more hands on deck, which means more training.
Pushing our young people into these careers.
Yes, and more training for people who are interested right now to go into that, to enable them to be skilled to work with our young people. So to be non-judgmental, to know how to engage, know how to build relationships, to understand the framework of what that young person's going through, and enable a response or a piece of work which will signpost them to where they need to go, or you're building a relationship in order to mentor them, moving them on. So my thing is, we need more hands on deck. Being a youth worker, youth practitioner, working with young people shouldn't be I'm talking about in our community, shouldn't be a look down upon skill set. That's number one. within the Muslim community, we have a lot of, even though we're coming to newer generations now, we have a lot of migrant parents who might not understand what their children are going through in urban London or in urban cities. There's a complete, disconnect. So enabling parents to understand the social landscape that their children have to navigate. Because what I've noticed is that some parents are like, I'm going to send my children to school because the school maybe back home was a privilege. You might have to pay for it, travel long distances to get to school, and it was a privilege. So coming to the UK, it's like, I'm going to send my kids to school. That's it. They've once they go through and not understanding the social landscape they have to navigate in school. When we're talking about trauma, we're talking about peer pressure, we're talking about all of these challenges that young people go through. So enabling parents to understand the landscape that their children are going through, so that if they do see something they don't understand, it's not a shock and they know how to deal with their children rather than pushing them away. And lastly, similar to what you said, safe spaces for our young people to thrive. Now, that's going to be difficult to do if the Masjid close their doors or if we're not supported by the Muslim corporates. But safe spaces for young people, and going back to the first two, because that's where I see where change happens is when if we have the spaces and more people trained and involved, like it will make a big difference. Yeah. The Muslim community, Allah Akbar, we have loads of doctors, loads of lawyers, loads of engineers, loads of civil servants, but practitioners we don't have.
I just want to add as well, and I think Jazal Khair for that, is that it needs to be a collective effort, And when I mean collective effort, there's two approaches. There's the community and organizations out there supporting and making work, engaging young Muslims as a strategy and making a priority. That needs to happen. And we as a community, we need to assess where does that come in the pecking order in terms of our priorities. And I think that is number one priority, because otherwise we're going to lose a generation, to wherever they're going to go.
But Jaleel, who leads on that?
Yeah. So but I think the leaders need to be big organisations who are considered umbrella organisations, who are working with other Muslim organisations. They need to decide. And I think recently there has been
push
happening.
Forward yourself.
Yeah,
I know, and build a consensus.
I know, alhamdulillah, there's a couple of organisations at the moment, are pushing it and are having conference on it and so forth. Which is amazing, which is good. But we need to have other organisations as well. So that's one perspective. And the other perspective as well, we need people to be kind of setting up organisations and being innovative in those organisations. 100%. It's not a one single approach. It's not just my project and I'm doing my project and that's going to solve the project. We have parenting programs. We need single parenting program, young children, young boys, mentors and so forth. So there's so much out there. We need we've got so many charity organizations. We need to replicate that same kind of numbers in terms of community projects. And this project is projects are not just supporting the individuals of young people, it's the whole family setup. Are you with me? So it's a massive project, it's a massive strategy, but we need to have that. It's a movement. It is a movement, and they talk about this. Even if they talk about now, government and so forth, they realize that it's not just working directly with those young people, it's everyone within the household. And that's what we need to be looking at, but we need to really have a serious discussion on
everyone
this.
Within the tribe. Yeah.
Yes.
The whole village.
Yeah.
You brought it back to it. That was slick.
Yeah.
That was slick.
Yeah. Not just a pretty face, bro. There's some stuff happening.
So it's not just like someone else. It's someone else's problem and someone else will do it. AbdulKarim will do this and let him deal with it. And it has to be. Everyone have to.
Absolutely.
So whether that's through your sadaqah, whether that is through your time. You need to kind of make it a priority because these are your generations. These are generations. Go for it.
Just add lastly, and what I find, unfortunately, is for many parents, for many organisations, it's not a priority until it happens to their child. Yeah. And then that's when I get the phone. That's when people like us will get the phone call. I was about
to tell you, when you said parents are bringing their kids, it's probably too late by then.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, help my kid. I'm like, when you have the conversation with that young person, it's like, you've been going down this road for a couple of years now and mummy or daddy didn't pick it up. So it's it's not to scare people, but the reality is everyone needs to get involved.
Everyone needs to wake up.
It's your children. You know, violence is indiscriminate, as I always say. Violence is indiscriminate. Doesn't care about your race, your creed, your color, your ethnicity. It's indiscriminate, so it's everybody's problem until it's your problem.
I'm afraid we've run out of time now. We've got some food to be eaten now. I don't want to send you off on an empty stomach, but we could go for ages. But I want to continue this discussion in future podcasts, inshallah. So Jazakallah khair for attending. Jazakallah khair at home. If you like this podcast, give it a like and a share. If you didn't, then you're racist, probably.
That was slick.
Or Islamophobic, at least.
Racist.
Can we also get can they contact you if they want to get hold of AbdulKarim?
Yeah, so I was going to say, if you want to do your bit for the future of the ummah, the future of the community and society, then reach out to these two gentlemen here. We'll put their details in the description. And yeah, Jazakallah khair. Also,
for a good discussion.
We're also available on wherever you get your podcasts, inshallah. So iTunes, Google, Spotify, and the rest of them. So please do, if you use those services, please do download, subscribe, give it the old 5 stars. And see you in the next podcast. Jazakallah khair.